This is Tristan da Cunha, the most remote inhabited island on Earth. It's in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, far away from literally everything. The nearest inhabited land is St. Helena, 1,500 miles away, but even they are isolated too. The closest mainland is Cape Town, South Africa, another 250 miles beyond that. And it's only from here in which you can go to Tristan da Cunha with a 6-day boat ride, since there's no airstrip on the island. And Tristan isn't a one-off type of remote location. There are the Pitcairn Islands in the South Pacific, which takes a flight to Tahiti, then a flight to Mangareva, French Polynesia, before boarding a 32-hour ship ride to get to. Or even if we're not to look at islands, like, and I don't know how to say this, Ittoqqortoormiit on the eastern flat edge of Greenland. There are no roads connecting it to the rest of the country for hundreds of miles. You'd have to fly to Iceland. Then, once or twice a week, there's a flight to a small airstrip on the Greenland coast, and from there, you would still need a helicopter or snowmobile ride for 25 miles to reach the town. With all this in mind, you can't help but wonder exactly how these places function. Remember, these aren't places where only scientists live for a few months out of the year in research stations. There are actual settlements that live here year-round without obligation. So how does it all work? How is it possible for these people in such remote areas to live? Well, when you're this far removed from the rest of the world, normal rules stop applying. But first things first, we should identify what these places are part of, because they're obviously not independent. That actually helps them survive given the funding they receive. Tristan da Cunha and the Pitcairn Islands are both British overseas territories, meaning they receive millions of dollars in federal funding for direct annual budget support. This is in the form of essential infrastructure maintenance, civil salaries, education, healthcare, and critical emergency disaster rescue, which was actually needed back in 1961 when the volcano on Isla Tristan da Cunha erupted, triggering the evacuation of the entire population to England for 2 years. In places with no viable tax base, no private sector depth, and extreme geographic isolation, this support is what prevents immediate collapse. As for Ittoqqortoormiit, it's a part of Greenland, so it's treated more as a failing town inside of a national system. But Greenland is an autonomous territory in the Kingdom of Denmark, so how it works is that Denmark sends about 500 million euros annually to Greenland, covering essential services like health and education, which amounts to over half its public budget and 20% of its GDP. Then Greenland decides how to use the funds, and remote settlements like Ittoqqortoormiit get a piece of it, which comes in the form of teachers and healthcare salaries, subsidized helicopter flights, heated public buildings, and more. So now, let's start with the most basic challenge, getting stuff there. In most of the world, if you need something, you go to a store or order it online, and it shows up in 2 days. But in Tristan da Cunha, with a population of 240 people, it's a bit different. On the island's only settlement, known as the Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, there's a store. But it only stocks what the last ship brought in, and that ship only comes about 8 to 10 times a year. But this isn't all, because these bigger ships have to anchor offshore since they're too big for the island's only port, Calshot Harbor, which is extremely small and shallow, so supplies get transferred onto smaller boats, then ferried to the pier. And even that can only happen in calm conditions. The island sits in the roaring 40s, a band of ocean known for relentless westerly winds and rough seas. It's not uncommon for a ship to arrive and then have to wait days before conditions are safe enough to offload anything. So if you forgot to order something or the ship couldn't dock because of the wind, which is very common, you wait weeks, sometimes months. The same goes for Pitcairn Island, though with their population of around just 35 people, supply ships visit even less often, just every 3 months. And like Tristan, there's no proper port. Its main supply ship, the MV Silver Supporter, anchors offshore near Bounty Bay, and supplies are transferred onto longboats that Till residents pilot themselves. It's a notoriously difficult landing too, as the bay is rocky and waves are unpredictable. Once the supplies reach shore, they're not done moving either. Everything has to be hauled up the hill of difficulty, a steep path from the landing point to the main settlement of Adamstown. In Ittoqqortoormiit, with the largest population of the three at 350, it's uniquely complicated. Since it's not surrounded by open ocean but rather ice, during winter the sea freezes entirely, cutting off boat access for about 3/4 of the year. So supplies come primarily by air when they can, but there's also no airstrip in the town itself. The nearest one is Nirlarit Inat, about 25 miles away from the coast. And for bulk supplies like fuel, that comes just once or twice a year when a tanker navigates through the brief summer window before the ice closes in again. Civilization in these places is simply complex. It takes a lot of skills. And speaking of that, there's nothing better that encompasses this than the book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization, the sponsor of this video. With over 400 pages, 180 topics, and 23 chapters, this is a book that is as in-depth as it is beautifully made, inside and out. Over 50 professionals and millions of dollars were involved in its creation. There is a blend of history, science, art, and design within these pages. From making fire to making bread to even making pigeon mail work, truly, it's a visual journey through the history of humankind's greatest inventions and discoveries. All the things that ultimately made these isolated settlements able to build their civilizations. The book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization, is the perfect book for those interested in not just survival, but curious about everything, really. So click the link in addition of this section to subscribe to the Day in Combos Guaranteed package, because this book features a 10% discount. Anyways, stockpiling is essential to living in these remote places, but what are the residents actually doing while living there? Well, on Tristan da Cunha, the waters around the island are home to the Tristan rock lobster, and they're valuable, so rock lobster fishing is really the only private industry. There's a processing factory where the lobsters are frozen and prepared for export, and when the supply ships come, they take the haul back to Cape Town for Kitlos, international distribution to the US and Japan. But here's what's interesting about Tristan's economy. It's not fully capitalist in the way most places are. Land on Tristan can't be bought or sold. It's communally held. Outsiders can't just show up and purchase property. You have to be accepted by the island council, and even then, land is allocated, not sold. Every family has their own field on the potato patches area assigned to them, which they farm for personal use. Cattle graze on communal land. It's part self-sufficiency, part community socialism, structured this way since the early settlers arrived. There's also no income tax there. The island government generates revenue through fishing license fees, the sale of postage stamps to collectors, and small-scale tourism when expedition ships stop by. But with only 240 people and the UK covering essential services, it doesn't have to be. As for Pitcairn, with just 50 people, there's no factory being run. But the land is extremely rich in agriculture and fish. I mean, most families grow their own food. The main industry is honey. See, the bees in Pitcairn are special because the island is so isolated. They've never been exposed to varroa mite or diseases devastating hives elsewhere in the world. This makes Pitcairn honey certified organic and disease-free, marketed as some of the rarest, purest honey on Earth. The operation is run through the Pitcairn Islands Producers Cooperative, exporting primarily through New Zealand. Besides, honey, stamps, just like Tristan da Cunha, are a collectible item given their rarity due to isolation and few people. It's niche, but it's something. And then there's Itakurptormit. It's more populated than any of these islands, yet the way of life is even more traditional. Local hunters have made a living from whale and polar bear hunting for generations, and it remains up to the present, a significant cultural and economic factor in the area. Tourism here is actually growing in importance, really being the only private sector driven by its extreme Arctic remoteness, unique Inuit culture, and stunning landscapes. So what do the future of these remote settlements have in store? Well, surprisingly, the strategies of how they're maintained are actually different. Let me explain. For Tristan da Cunha, the future is about preservation without growth. Their population may be small, but it's held steady for decades. The UK treats the island as a place that must continue to exist, even if it never becomes economically viable. Tristan isn't expected to grow, but it's expected to survive. That's why there's still some modernization and infrastructure projects being done on the island, such as the building of the Camogli Healthcare Center rather than maintaining the old hospital. Meanwhile, on Pitcairn, it sits on the opposite end of the spectrum. Sure, it's getting some funding and all, but the UK strategy for it is more on the side of managed decline. Basic services are maintained, legal obligations are met, and residents are protected, but there is no long-term effort to preserve the settlement itself. And maybe that's a good thing after all, because, well, that whole abuse scandal they had, which is too horrific to talk about on YouTube. Unlike Tristan da Cunha, you ask if there's not even a hospital on the island. The closest one is at least 2 days away by ship in Tahiti or New Zealand. So if there's a medical emergency, well, yeah, finally. With Ita Kortor Meat, it's a bit complicated. It isn't some overseas territory, it's literally part of Greenland. While you'd think that'd make sure the settlement survives, since it's the only remaining one in eastern Greenland, that's not actually the case. In fact, Cap Hope, which was a settlement just 9 miles west of Itokortormeet, became abandoned in 2005. The town itself isn't guaranteed a future, but as long as people live there, it'll be supported. Climate change further complicates things, though the ice is retreating, which, while making the area more accessible to cruise ships and tourists, is also disrupting the hunting that the community depends on. Polar bear and seal patterns are shifting. The traditional way of life that has sustained Itokortormeet for generations may not survive the century. Something all three of these places are also having to deal with is the reality of the younger generations. Let me explain. Most people in these settlements are on the older side. In fact, on Pitcairn, pensioners are supposedly now outnumbering the working class. For those who are now, there just isn't much to do in these places. I mean, in Tristan da Cunha, there's literally only one pub, the Albatross Bar. The others have nothing that comes close. But more importantly, there's the question of education. They all only have one school, usually running up until the ages of 15 or 16. After that, in Tristan, students must leave for education in the UK or South Africa. In Pitcairn, children are sent to New Zealand. And in Itokortormeet, students have to go to Nuuk, the capital and largest city in Greenland, with a population of still just 20,000 people, or to Denmark. Because of this, migration isn't really a choice, but it's built into the life cycle. Once young people leave, many don't come back. They form social circles elsewhere, find jobs that don't exist at home, and get used to a level of freedom and opportunity that these settlements can't realistically offer. Returning often means giving that up. Fewer careers, fewer people your age, fewer choices overall. When it comes to relationships, this is especially apparent when looking at the two British territorials. On Tristan da Cunha, all 240 residents descend from just 15 original settlers, 8 men and 7 women, who arrived between 1816 and 1908. There's basically only 7 surnames on the entire island. Everyone is related to everyone. Medical researchers have actually studied Tristan specifically because of this. Asthma affects nearly half the population, traced back to just 3 of those original settlers who carried the gene. Pitcairn is even smaller. Only 4 or 5 family surnames exist, all descending from the Bounty mutineers and their Tahitian companions who arrived in 1910. Finding a partner without leaving isn't really possible. Despite all these things, though, people have been staying. Back in 1961, when all Tristan residents were evacuated from the island to England due to the volcano, they could way further. There was access to everything, but most of them chose to go back regardless. I mean, the fact these settlements still exist means something. But to be frank, the future decline seems inevitable. Pitcairn specifically has tried to reverse it. The UK has run recruitment campaigns offering free land and housing assistance to anyone willing to relocate there, but basically no one has taken them up on it. And that shouldn't come as a surprise. Even depopulated villages in countries like Italy and Spain, offering better weather, better food, and just a 2-hour flight from major cities, have struggled to attract new residents despite generous incentives. Because if sunny Sicilian villages are failing to attract enough people with good incentives, what chance does a 32-hour boat ride from Tahiti have? The world is getting more and more connected, but not in a good way for isolated towns. So in the end, these communities aren't just fighting geography, they're reliving time. As long as young people have to leave to build a future, the question isn't whether these places can survive today, it's how many generations they have left. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. I'll see you in the next one.